23, 13, 22, 47. Broadcast. Ouija boards are not toys.
Good evening, Truth Seeker. Tonight's broadcast of the Society of Virtuous Pagans Voices from the Aether program is somewhat special. At the time that I am making this recording, the Voices from the Aether program has only recently become accessible via the internet. Now, this is a wonderful thing, but I'm afraid it's quite literally all vacuum tubes with me, so I'm not sure I fully understand it. That said, expanding our mission in any way is a good thing. Recently, we made an appeal to our listeners via our various platforms, as our social media manager would call them. We requested, and are still requesting, that you share stories about hauntings that you believed were true, or stories which, though you could not account for their truth, came from sources that you trusted enough to think there just might be something. These aren't your common run-of-the-mill, read them on the internet, or creepypasta ghost stories. These are stories that you yourself tell and believe to be true, or stories that come from sources that we would have a very hard time believing would simply make up such a thing. So, in exchange for your sharing them, we asked, and continue to ask, for your permission to share them here. In exchange, we are crediting the people who submit them, at least to the extent they wish to be credited, and we want to make sure that their stories are told in as respectful and accurate a way as we can. To our delight, to my personal joy, we've actually received more than one submission. This, then, is the first of your listener-submitted stories. They are not fictionalized in any way, nor has the Nagoya mimetic been applied in any fashion. I think this is a very interesting one to start with as well. So, without further ado, well, one more ado. If you like the content that you've been hearing on our channel, and you'd like to help the Society's mission grow throughout the world, we ask that you please consider liking and subscribing this program. Please subscribe to us if you're listening to us on a podcast service, as that does a huge amount of good in getting us into the algorithm and getting our message out to as many listeners as possible. One more thing. If you yourself have a story that you would like to submit, we would love to hear it. Feel free to send that to societyofvirtuouspagans@gmail.com. As before, you will be fully credited for your story, at least to the extent you would like, and you'll even be assigned an official SM number in exchange for your assistance with our continuing research. We thank you very much. Anyway, as I was saying, without further ado, for real this time, let's go to our first. I proudly give you Report from the Field number 1. Ouija boards are not toys. By one JR.
Recently I saw your request for stories of hauntings and related material. I listened from the first episode, at least I think it was your first episode, and I thought perhaps I'd tell the story of someone very close to me. This is a story I believe to be true, and it comes from my wife. You can call her Jay. A bit of background perhaps to establish my biases. My partner and I have been married for more than 20 years at this stage. It feels strange to say that, but there is. We're married in our 20s and now we're in our 40s. It's a rather surreal feeling, to be sure. I'm happy to say that we have in our marriage what might have been called a true love match in an earlier age. We are sincerely and genuinely in love, and she is my best friend and, it sounds really strange to say it this way, my lover. Jay and I were born in 2 different countries. She was born in the United States and of course I was born in Ireland. But we have a lot in common. We both love history. We both grew up relatively poor. We both abhor conspicuous displays of wealth. We both love bananas. We both have terrible relationships with our parents. We're really quite a match. We're also gigantic nerds. For Jay, it was Star Wars, Star Trek The Next Generation, The X-Files and Dragonlance. For myself, it was Doctor Who, Judge Dredd, Red Dwarf and Blackadder. When we began dating, we bonded over Spaceballs, Monty Python and Austin Powers films. We met during a role-playing game in college, and as I say, we are tremendous nerds, and that sort of cemented us together. We've been inseparable ever since. Now, Jay and I have the sort of marriage that means we keep no secrets. We trust each other implicitly, unless we can't possibly know everything about each other. Even now, we've been open about every one of the various life experiences we've had. The good, the bad, the awful. She knows about my heartbreaks, my difficult relationship with my parents, etc. In turn, I know many things about her. For years, however, there was one subject that she refused to talk about. One thing I knew was a sensitive topic, but one I couldn't help but be fascinated about. You see, Jay and I are somewhat fascinated by ghost stories. Specifically, we're not so much believers or seekers of the supernatural, but we are really interested in the history behind them. We've taken more than our fair share of so-called ghost tours over the years, and for the most part, while they make for a good laugh, we've often been frustrated that those who offer their so-called expertise in such subjects tend to, well, as Jay would say, talk out of their arses. Even when the stories they tell are believable, they're marred irreparably by the teller repeating something they heard when researching the story. Research in quotes there. Usually some corrupted version of the original tale that bears little resemblance to the earliest reports. Folk tales, you say, so what? Oh, I agree. But when your report goes back over a century, when you've got the tools to research what might actually have happened to inspire the stories, when there are literally newspaper articles there, well, that's just being a lazy storyteller now, isn't it? Let me give you an example. There's a place you've probably heard of, St. Augustine in Florida. Very old city, town, whatever you want to call it, going back to the 17th century. And there are a lot of stories about that place. A lot of old cemeteries there. One is told about one of the cemeteries and the ghost of a small boy who's been reported haunting the front gate area of the cemetery since the late 19th century. Now here's the thing. There really is a little boy, 8 or 9 years old, I think, when he passed, buried very close to the gate of the cemetery in the mid-19th century. He has a name, a date of birth, and a time of death. Almost certainly a death from the yellow fever epidemic, though the information doesn't say that. Allegedly, this little boy, this little poor victim, attempts to attract the attention of passers-by, circles a nearby tree, one we know has been growing there since the 1860s, and can often be heard laughing and calling out from the branches, a friendly spirit with no ill intentions, so far as the accounts go. This, however, is not enough. For the local guide, this was an entirely different story. No, she embellished, he was a haunted child, calling for other children to join him forever. No historical account says that. Billy, she said, was the son of the sexton who kept the cemetery. One day he was playing in this large ancient tree, despite his father's instructions not to do so, fell and he died instantly. Perhaps instantly anyway. And his parents were unaware of his death, for a time, before they found him beneath the tree. And of course they were struck by sadness. He, apparently, didn't realize he died either. He fell down so suddenly that the experience didn't take. At any rate, because of this, and because his parents were too saddened by what happened after visiting the grave a few times, they were so burdened by guilt that they threw up all their stuff, packed it away, and left the city never to return. From that time on, the little boy has been haunting the ghost tree and trying to lure other children to playing with him forever in the most nefarious and wicked of ways. Except, of course, that all of that's complete bullshit. First of all, we have the name of that boy, and it ain't Billy. The second thing is that he is buried near the tree, just within a few feet of it. We have a parish record that says he passed of an unnamed illness. Again, we think it was yellow fever. We know who his parents were, too. The father wasn't a sexton, and as far as I know, the mother had nothing to do with the cemetery at all. So, that's more making things up, just to make a better story. See, the oldest versions of this story have a somewhat sadder version of events. They say that the haunting, if it really is a thing, occurred because of a tragic reality. The little boy in question predeceased his parents by only a few years, possibly from the same illness. And so, without his parents to visit his grave and with no other living relatives, the old stories say, perhaps he's still circling the graveyard looking for his parents or searching for playmates while he waits for a time to join them in the hereafter. It's a nice story, a sad one, but a nice one. Certainly nothing to do with an evil child trying to lure innocent souls to their doom. Absolutely nothing about his falling from a tree and dying instantly either. Given that this is a town that in the 1930s was still posting stories about pies being stolen from bakeries, one would think such a thing would merit news. But it doesn't appear, because it didn't happen. Hell, in the little town where I was born, there was a huge old willow tree that was responsible for the injuries of several innocent climbers of young age, and at least one death. It was so notorious that the local merchants cut it down, burned the wood, and placed a warning fence around the stump of the old tree, one you can still visit today. I know this because it's recorded. I know this because my own grandfather watched it being cut down. In our opinion, there's no need to tell a silly story when the actual story is just as interesting and, if you believe in them anyway, very probable in the sense of a legitimate reason for a haunting. As a sort of part of that, we're also interested in the accounts of people who have investigated ghost stories over the centuries. People who investigated them and debunked them. People who investigated them and wrote things down thinking they were actually seeing something legitimate or hearing about something legitimate that had happened. So, of course, one of the things that we came across was the Ouija board, the so-called spirit board. The name Ouija board is something that was used to popularly market here in the United States. First, they tried to market it as a sort of legitimate means of reaching the dead. And then, by the 1960s, they started selling it as a board game like anything else. It was sort of a gimmick that people broke out at fraternity and sorority parties or initiation rituals for various secret societies. Subsequently, it seems, they sort of fell out of popularity, and they only began to re-emerge when Jay and I were attending college in the late 1990s. Now, I'd never encountered one myself outside going to a thrift store and seeing one half broken on a shelf. Jay, on the other hand, always sneered at those things. If you can talk to the dead, she'd tell me, it shouldn't be treated like a game. Those things aren't toys, they aren't games. When I'd ask her to elaborate, she'd grow dark for a moment and then shake her head, deflecting. Shouldn't be selling those things as toys, she'd mutter, and usually lead on to another discussion about false mediums or interesting ghost stories she'd heard as a child. For years, I tried to get to know what it was made her so uncomfortable about Ouija boards. I thought of them as nothing more than stupid toys, but for her, it was something else, something more. It wasn't so much that it was a toy, so much as it was that it was being sold as such. Shouldn't mess with those things, she'd say, and go on to point out the bit in the Bible where an attempt to bring up the spirit of Samuel, I think, meets with near disaster. But she would never elaborate why Ouija boards, specifically Ouija boards, gave her what was clearly an uncomfortable feeling. So what changed? I don't know. I think perhaps it was a combination of late night conversation and the after effects of listening to your Happy Hoppity Bunny broadcast. You can't see the Happy Hoppity Bunny. The Happy Hoppity Bunny cannot see you, lest I forget. Did you ever have creepy experiences with toys as a child? I asked Jay. The Ouija board thing hadn't even crossed my mind at the time. She paused for a moment and then she conceded that yes, she had. Oh, I remembered. It's that Ouija board incident. Jay got very quiet. Several minutes had passed, and I was just about falling asleep when Jay said that yes, that was exactly what she was thinking of, and that, for the first time in the years of our knowing each other, she wanted to share that story with me. I glanced at her in the darkness of our bed and I blinked. This I'm very keen to hear, I said. And so, Jay opened up. The following is Jay's account of the story. I asked her to consider writing it down, and once she'd done that, I mentioned your call for personal accounts. Once again, Jay surprised me. I think she felt it was cathartic to share because she agreed to share the story on the condition that certain details of our personal lives and the identities of the participants were deliberately changed or removed. I agreed. Before I click send, I want to be very clear that this is a true story as far as Jay is concerned. And whilst I myself am something of a skeptic regarding this sort of thing and many others, I must tell you that Jay is not prone to making up stories. She tells this story with great conviction, and I am, biased of course, willing to concede that it is almost certainly true. As for what caused it, why it happened, what it was even, I've no idea. I'll leave that to the society and to my fellow listeners to decide. Hope you can use it. Sincerely, R.
Why Ouija boards are not toys, as recounted by J and R.
Preteen and teenage girls in the 90s had wild sleepovers, but not in the way their parents feared. Oh, I'm sure some got into their parents' liquor cabinets and a few managed to get a joint from an older sibling. But the big craze was amateur witchcraft. That's right, while the 13-year-old boys were staying up all night chugging Mountain Dew and having belching contests, their female counterparts were summoning demons. Well, maybe not demons exactly, but messing around with the supernatural? Definitely. One popular game was light as a feather, stiff as a board. One girl would lie on her back on the floor in the dark, surrounded by others. Another girl would hold a flashlight and read a ghost story, while another would rub the prone girl's temples in circles, with the goal of inducing a trance-like state. After the story was finished, the group of girls would chant, "Light as a feather, stiff as a board," over and over again, while trying to lift the girl who was lying down into the air, using as little force as possible. If it worked, the girl could be lifted from the floor by the others easily, each using one hand or even just their fingertips. I recall this working at times with the other girls, but I always wondered if one or two exerted most of the force, leaving the others to think that their fingertips were doing their share of the lifting. Somehow, it never worked with me, though. I was told I was too much of a nerd to be able to draw energy from the other side. That, at least, is true. I'm convinced now that I have all the psychic resonance of a peanut butter sandwich. I do not believe in magic or witchcraft or the ability of human beings to influence matters beyond the veil. But can we contact the dead? Or can we contact entities that we should, by all rights, have nothing to do with? I think so. This was to be a special sleepover. My friend Amanda, who had blazing red hair and the bluest eyes I'd ever seen, also claimed to be a witch. A real witch from a long line of witches going back at least to her great great grandmother. She told us what ley lines were and the importance of warding a room with candles, sage, sigils, or all three before attempting any kind of supernatural contact. Tonight, we had plans to try the Ouija board during a sleepover at Janelle's house, but according to Amanda, we were going to do it right this time. She knew the right incantations and had the right candles. She told me her only concern was that Erin would mess things up. Erin would know if she'd been left out because her brothers were friends, but Erin was a devout Christian, some kind of Baptist, and she was always extremely skittish any time we pulled out a Ouija board or tried to put someone under hypnosis. She was concerned about us falling under the influence of Satan or worse. Before that night, I had talked to her and assured her that she didn't have to worry. I was a Christian too, and I was no fan of Satan, but none of this was real. We were just playing around. And she didn't have to join us if she didn't want to. No one would blame her for sitting this one out. But Erin was a 13-year-old girl, and her need to be included outweighed her fear of Lucifer. After snacks upstairs, the five of us headed down to the basement. We watched TV until Janelle's parents went to bed, and then we got to work. Amanda gave Erin a stern lecture that she was under no circumstances to mention Jesus. Erin asked what I thought was a very logical question, however, which was, if the name of Jesus would make those spirits angry, then aren't those spirits aligned with Satan? At this point, Melissa chimed in. Melissa was 15. She'd recently moved from Chicago after her parents' divorce. She had tattoos and claimed to have been involved in gang stuff. She delighted in joining us for our more wholesome activities. She marveled at roasting marshmallows over a campfire. Guess you can't do that in a big city high-rise. Small town life gave her the freedom to be silly. I'd never seen anyone actually bury themselves in the hay on a hayride before. Melissa said to Erin, "Look, we don't want nasty evil spirits. We're trying to find the nice ones, the kind with unfinished business that we might be able to help. But the bad ones could show up too. Also, there might be some, neutral spirits who aren't happy that they got left behind, and reminding them of Jesus would make them sad. Come on, you'll be fine." We lit 4 small candles, one to sit on the ground in front of each of us. Amanda lit one large white candle directly in front of the board, placing herself in front of the 5th candle. Part of the basement had carpet, but we sat cross-legged on the cold concrete of the unfinished part, so the candles would have a more stable surface. Except for the candles, all the lights were out. Very faint moonlight came in through the tiny windows at the top of the basement, glistening off the whitewashed and gloss-coated concrete blocks of the basement wall. Amanda made each of us promise not to move the planchette. Then she had us take several deep breaths together while closing our eyes. She directed us to open them, and to each put only 2 fingers of one hand on the planchette. She started by asking, as one might expect, "Is anyone with us tonight?" We sat expectantly. Nothing happened. We waited 2 solid minutes. We would try our best, at least, at first, so we stayed quiet. The only sounds were breathing and the wind outside. I tried my best not to fidget or move my hand. Then, the planchette slowly started to move. I wasn't surprised. I assumed one of the 5 of us had had enough waiting. I let my fingertips be pulled along with the moving plastic underneath. It spelled YOU. There was a gasp from Erin. Then WISH. "Melissa, take this seriously, damn it," Amanda hissed. All right, just trying to lighten the mood. Geez, so tense in here. Yeah, that's kind of the point, okay? So let's do this again. Everybody close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. We did, but Melissa's breaths were just a little too loud. Amanda chose to ignore it, stepping up her request to the beyond in a theatrical tone. We seek answers to the age-old question, what happens to our souls after we die? Will we all move on, or will some stay behind? Is there anyone here who has been left behind? Almost immediately, the planchette moved a little. It seemed to drift toward the bottom just before the goodbye, but then changed direction and sped up the top of the board. Yes. Small gasps from around the board. Everybody was surprised or apparently very good at faking it. We all leaned in, our heads close together over the board, while taking care not to disturb the candles in front of us, or to burn ourselves. Amanda coughed. Then she recovered. What's your name? The planchette moved again, more deliberately this time. From the yes space. No. No? No name? But the spirit, if that's what it was not done. The planchette continued to move. T, E, L, L. No telling. I hadn't moved the planchette, and I couldn't see or feel that any of the other four were obviously moving it either. I was intrigued, so of course I stated the obvious. They don't want to tell us. Shush, Jay. Do you have another message for us, spirit? The planchette moved, steering our hands slowly, deliberately. WARNTOMORROW. War. Tomorrow. Amanda's voice rose. Warn us about what for tomorrow? The planchette jerked back up to the right corner. No. Then slowly, two familiar letters. Telling. Well, that just doesn't make sense, unless it's just messing with us. There was no question pending, but the spirit, if that's what it was, took issue with the comment from Melissa, and the planchette moved again. N-O-T-A-N. Not an it. Of course, you're not an it. Could you tell me, please, if you are a boy or a girl, then? No response for several seconds. And then slowly, a centimeter at a time, the planchette drifted downward and toward the right. It finally rested on a single word. We looked at each other. Was it done then? Was it using by to mean boy? Amanda tried again. Did you go? Where do you go? The candle in front of Melissa suddenly blew out. There was no gust of wind. Melissa's chest did not rise and fall. There was no airflow at all. Was it me? Or did the planchette feel cold to the touch? The planchette raced across the board chaotically for a couple of seconds. My fingers struggled to keep up. In response to the question, where did you go? She, quite clearly spelled H-E-L-L. Hell. The candle in front of me went out. I can assure you that I had nothing to do with it. Erin had been quiet for the entire time. But this was enough for her to act. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I hereby banish you to back from whence you came. And then, despite her being a Baptist, she started up in Latin like some sort of Catholic priest. In nomine Patri. All of the candles began to wink on and off, as though they were powered by, light switches and not actual flames. Some of us screamed, maybe even me, I can't remember. In our shock, all of us took our hands off the planchette and began to look around in confusion. But there was another sound that filled the silence after. The quiet scraping of the plastic planchette moving, I swear to you, moving on its own. Now it was moving to two words. Good. Bye. Janelle leapt to her feet, full of adrenaline. She turned on every light she could find. The rest of us sat there staring at each other, breathing hard, for a solid minute. Of course, Amanda later let Erin have it for breaking the rules in such a spectacular fashion. We didn't go to sleep. We couldn't go to sleep. Instead, we left the lights on all night and watched movies from Janelle's collection of rom-coms until dawn. We never used that Ouija board again. But that one, it came home with me. I was the only one willing to take it. At first, I kept trying to tell myself that it could not have been real. Maybe Erin set it all up to help us see the error of our ways? But no, her terror and panic as she evoked the Lord were genuine. Melissa wouldn't do it. She would never terrorize us on purpose. I didn't think any of the others would either. I was watching their hands. I would have noticed it if any of them were moving the planchette. So eventually, I had to conclude that we had actually encountered something that was not from this plane of existence. I threw that Ouija board out, and I refused to touch another one.
And that, my friends, is it. It's Jay's story in its entirety, as written by Jay and passed on by R. The details are true, as she remembers them. And in the words of the old radio and television programs, names were altered to protect the innocent. What did Jay experience that night? Was it a cruel trick by a friend? A prank that got a little too dark for the prankster to keep it up? Or did Jay experience something that neither she nor her friends were prepared for? This is neither the time nor the place to indulge in a discussion on the afterlife, heaven, or hell. I am not here to disabuse you of your particular beliefs regarding the subject. Not today. I will, however, agree with Jay in one very important respect. One should approach the other side, the questions of life and death, with more reverence than might be expressed in an over-marketed, cheaply produced toy. Otherwise, who knows what sort of answer you might receive. Should you encounter such things, should you feel alone, should you feel afraid, remember this. Have faith. We know. Be kind to each other, friends, especially right now.
85, 42, 8, 18. Broadcast ends.
Hello again. Do you have a story to tell? Have you experienced a haunting or something adjacent to such a thing? Does the source you trust have a story you have their permission to share? We aren't looking for folktales here. Tell us about your experiences you believe could actually be true. Send them along to societyofvirtuouspagans@gmail.com. We'll modify them to script format if necessary, and you will be fully credited in the manner you prefer. We're happy to extend your own unique society member identification number in exchange, and in the future, perhaps we'll even be able to send you some goodies in thanks for your contributions to our continuing mission. The proceeding has been provided as a public service by the Society of Virtuous Pagans. Our thanks to Jay for allowing us to share this story with all of you. We are very grateful for her contribution, and thank you to R for convincing her to share it with us. We look forward to hearing from more of you. Jay's story was presented tonight by August Brotherton and Guinevere McGregor. The original story belongs to Jay and R and is shared with their permission. Our editing was done by Creative Minds Audio. The channel's logo was created by Mazface. Our Helios Radio was created by Kieran Byrne. The Society of Virtuous Pagans was created by Alex Bagassi. In the name of the public good, the entirety of this broadcast and its associated media have been left free of the Nagoya mimetic.